Okay. Hello, everyone. I thought of recording a quick episode about a sentence that entered my mind today. And today I think I was stuck in traffic for about 3 hours. And there was just this moment where the sentence, God is the light of the soul. For a second there was something there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that sentence had a value. Do you understand? Like an archaeologist finds something very rare. But it doesn't know how rare, but feels like it's pretty rare. Like people don't know there's this huge rock market in China. And in that rock market, what goes on is that people go on choosing rocks, and then they buy the rocks, and then they cut them to see what was in the egg. Do you know what was in the rock? Was it like rare green jade, or was it something else? You know? The significance of this episode is honestly, I wondered, like, every moment, think of it this way. Think of like deep observation of reality being like a swimming pool. And believe it or not, any moment you can dive into the swimming pool. But the thing is, you cannot stay in it, but, you know, you can experience it, right? We are living at such an interesting time where the species is acting like it's only physical, but it's non-physically claiming it's physical. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a mystery to consciousness, and really what it is this is, I think, one of the, genius contributions of the Mr.Within archetype to human civilization, that we have to, as a species, begin caring for each other's inner lives. Okay, that's what the whole liberal movement is, right? So many people don't understand the new, let's say, waves of feminism, right? And there's this, like, you see it in, like, I don't know, at least like in TikTok, like there's tons of videos about this, so it feels like it's a big thing, you know? But you see, the species is reaching a point where it is becoming so comfortable surviving existentially that it has the luxury of subjectively identifying as whatever it chooses. Do you understand? Like, so, there, let's say, you know what it is? If it's all about context, right? Somebody could feel like there is no home, no sense of home, and then there's some people who they feel the whole cosmos is their home. The whole universe is part of the way they're being present, right? When I say God is the light of the soul, I'm this, person, this kid who in 1991 was born in, Tehran, Iran. And then at a very young age, my parents brought me to Canada for a couple years, and then we went back to Iran. And then, I don't know, I think my parents had an, indirect, subconscious ambition to be basketball players. We went so many back and forth. Do you know? But at, high school and, college and everything, I've been here, right? But the idea is, what I'm trying to say is, what I've observed is human consciousness and how human consciousness treats itself and how responsible it is. When you look at the average human being, let's say there are 3 dimensions of consideration. Let's say that every being, let's say there's an idea, we call it the advanced being, and let's say we put an equal sign and a question mark. What is an advanced being? Okay, let's just wonder about this. In religion, in certain religions, for example, in the Islamic religion, there's 99 names and attributes given to the archetype of God. And one of these attributes is greatness. Okay, and what can greatness mean? Greatness is advancement. Do you know when you appreciate it, it becomes greatness? You can appreciate advancement at any moment and feel the greatness of civilization. Do you know? In my inner realms, I see probabilities of how the future can be. I write about it in my sci-fi and all that. I see visions of how it can be, but at the same time, do you know what it is? It's kind of like, I don't know who was Carl Sagan, I don't know who said it, but somebody said like the universe is not obligated to make sense to you. It's not obligated to explain itself to you. Right? So what it means is that we're actually found in an unknown world, and our best strategy is to act like we know it. And that's what everybody is doing. They're acting like they know what they are. But spirituality means you don't know who you are. That's where it begins. And it doesn't matter if you're a 90-year-old man or a 9-year-old kid, or a 19-year-old, person, At some point, you just realize it's a changing event. We are playing the game of simulating and then turning a verb, an unknown verb, into a known noun. We are doing this through language. We're being raised in a system that acknowledges it this way, even. Right? Ludwig Wittgenstein, I remember when I heard this quote, how, I remember the first time I figured out that the pyramids of, Egypt exist, right? That was there was this book, there were 7 wonders of the world. The Pyramid of Giza was the last one remaining, but there was evidently this giant statue, holding a torch kind of thing. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is I've wondered about what's going on here. I've noticed that there's 8 billion creatures on a rock, right? That's spinning in God, God knows who knows where, right? We don't know where we are. The species is acting, right? We all know this, right? It's all acting. Because in the void, how can there be the creation of meaning? You see, this is the bizarre nature of the simulation argument. Right? That existence is artificial, because how can a changing reality be a noun? Do you understand? We treat truth like a noun, and then every verb is like, yo, we're in a simulation because it's changing. To be honest, God is the notion of an inconceivable origin. And what does an inconceivable origin mean? It means the concept has no context it can understand. It means the human being will attempt till the end of time to unravel the secrets of this realm, only to realize it can't. Only to realize that it's here to play a role. You understand? That was probably one of the hardest things I had to accept about this life. Right? Because if you think about life, if you just emotionally analyze reality, or emotionally articulate, let's say, right, or emotionally consider reality, then your emotions, if you notice, they're inner realm freedom oriented. That means the person, it's like you're a being that behind your eyes, you're way more free than in front of your eyes, so you have so many desires. It's like just the fact that we can have an opinion on anything is the symbol and the sign of the greatest intelligence in the cosmos. Do you understand? There's something moving here in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's like divine enough, right? Somebody's like, yo, Mr.Within, it's not a god, it's the forces of nature. And I'm like, yo, great, who created the forces of nature? Do you see the infinite regress? Do you see how the human mind has created a cause and effect world that is in some sense kind of validated by language, to the point where Ludwig Wittgenstein said the limits of my language are the limits of my world? Again, what does he mean? He means that what I believe does not exist as much as what I am believing. Do you understand? You see, I mean, hear this way. I mean, let me say it this way. If somebody says Mr. Within, you say God is the light of the soul. So you need to explain what a soul is. You need to explain what you mean by light and what do you mean by God. So what is an inconceivable origins light? Do you see? And look at what's fascinating. What creates a shadow? Carl Jung spoke about the shadow. What is that? Culturalism has brainwashed us in micro purposes that are as hollow as an individual contribution to itself only. Right? I thought about it like, whatever people say, like it's like you can kind of critically think about life and figure it out. Believe it or not. Like you can figure parts of it out. And so how we critically think about it is, for a second, I was raised, in different cultural contexts, different waves of information hit me as a child, as a human being. Different senses of self have simulated numerous senses of self. 31 laps around the sun means I have experienced infinite variations of myself, or it feels that way. If we realize infinity is the quality of the presence of reality, then there's nothing to fear, and there's nothing to really achieve, right? But this doesn't mean that advanced civilization in the outer realms shouldn't be built. Many come, many go. Who stays? Who knows? So in order to explain the sentence, just curiosity, guys, this episode is not me trying to impose some sort of judgment or critique. I'm a person who considers that only God knows what's in the heart of man, and only God can unseal the heart of man. That means a person can do so many artificial acts of good deeds, but it's only with an awareness of what was in the room before you that you, in some sense, you don't find the divine has already found you. Do you understand? Because you're moving it. You are the moment's truth. Not in the sense that you are simulating an idea, in the sense that you are part of a movement so beyond. Do you understand? We call ourselves human. We're the tip of an iceberg of an existential event so massive, so transcendental, so multi-angle, so multifaceted. We don't know if there's so many worlds because the eyes of the creatures are different, or there's in some sense actually so many different worlds. Do you see? And so that's remarkable, because consciousness is accessing reality, but what is going on here is not a human being living on a planet. It's an unknown first-person point of view witness. And believe it or not, it's strangely attributeless in the sense of the Upanishad saying the seer of the seen is unseen. Swordsmanship through language sometimes means to, in some sense, let go of the weight. Do you see, like, the biggest thing I realized about mastery? I could say one thing I was really obsessed about. Like, I remember as a kid, right, we were in a hotel, my parents were in a hotel, we were like this kind of like, Muslim family on a road trip, and I remember we were in this hotel, and me and my twin brother were under like this kind of like secondary bedding thing, right? I don't know how to say it. It was like we were on these extra beds they had brought in the room. My parents were on the bed, and we were watching like this family moment, and I think me and my brother were like maybe like 11, 12 or something. I remember seeing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And especially that scene where the dude's trying to reverse his blood flow to like reverse the poison, and I'm like, bro, it's circular though, you know. But anyways, it would literally have to change his brain function if his heart would beat differently, right? If the blood in your veins like move differently, your heart would probably behave differently, so your brain would behave differently. So I think that's an impossible feat to do consciously, actually. I mean, that movie was fiction. They were like running on a pond, but that's one thing I wish to see. Anybody who creates the technology where humanity can run on leaves of a tree, like floating technology, you will be the greatest inventor in history. People will make sure of the amount of joy you bring, right? If humanity, like in one of my sci-fi stories, I've written about a type of humanity that is in some sense, how can I tell you? Everybody has jetpacks. In the future, children don't go on buses to schools. The school hovers over the neighborhood, and every kid with a jetpack goes to school, flies to school. And when they enter the school, every child can choose the theme of the type of experience of high school they want. You know why? Because it's all cyber oriented. In cyberspace, they can have a Harry Potter day. Everybody is like a cyber Harry Potter avatar in the school. Do you understand what I'm saying? The janitor is like Hagrid or something. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's all in a cyberspace experience connected, overlaying reality. Do you know what that means? Just like how we use imagination to test reality before actually doing things in real life. Like that's the kind of point of our inner life. It's like living ahead of us and then we follow it up. Anyways, God is the light of the soul, and man has become the voice of the world. It's so fascinating. I will give it around a couple thousand years. I mean, that's kind of too safe. Let's say I'll give it 1,200 years from now. We will reach an era of psychological freedom, psychological liberation, that the future generations will have so many different ways to look at the moment, right, than to, in some sense, accept suffering. Do you understand? It's really the life you have, the force you have while you're being something. Do you know, there's moments where I am completely alone with the cosmos. I even hear the silence. Like there's this, I don't know if people have noticed, but if you wake up early in the morning, there is a silence to the day before the cars are on the road. Or if you're living on a farm before the rooster knows what's going on. So what I'm saying is, whether nature's alarm clock, it's fascinating. The rooster makes a noise when the sun comes up, and the wolf makes a noise when the moon comes up. Like the animals probably have a consciousness of celestial bodies that, like, if we connect advanced AI in the future, give it let's say 400 years, we connect advanced AI to, like, let's say turtles or basic animals, and then they have a capacity to express their consciousness at the sophistication of the human being. I've given a talk, I don't know if I ever uploaded it, but I remember it's like kind of like I expressed it in the world in this lifetime, okay, where I gave a talk where I was speaking to AI and androids. I was just speaking to any machine that had become self-conscious, right? And another talk, which I think I'll give in the future, is only to the audience of the lesser species waking up to what humanity has been doing, and how humanity woke up to what in some sense the divine was doing. Do you see? It's always in some sense the allure of the upper world, right? So what this means is that imagine there was someone great. Imagine like you had an older brother or an older sister, and this sibling of yours was greater than you in every way. And this was a person you honored. This was a person you tried to be like. Do you understand? So it's kind of like there's an upper, it's kind of like we are looking up to something, whether it's an endless sky, or whether it's to a sort of inconceivable origin point where all reality is the inconceivable is the common denominator between the known and the unknown. What that means is space knows what matter can't know, regardless of how long it changes. You see, dear beings, we are the spirit of humanity, and we will all assemble in our roles. And what that means is that it's the slumber. It's like the giant, the sleeping giant is waking up. And what that means is in the ignorance of egoic indecision or egoic indecency. Do you know? What I'm saying is that it was as if like some people got into power and they demonstrated evil. So what they have done is they have actually pulled themselves out of the world. Because if the world decides to go to a good place, the karma of the evil will be like a sort of weight bearing them down. Do you understand? It's kind of, this might be bizarre, but the soul is trying to like swim from the bottom of the ocean, you know, up to above water. Do you understand? Or like excuse me, the ego. Let's say the ego is trying to swim from the bottom of the ocean to above water, right? And it's never seen what above water is. And imagine some people are swimming up, you know, and imagine in this water civilization where everybody has, you know, weights, and imagine when people get enlightened, their weights come off and then they can swim higher up to get to the closer to the surface of the water. You see, I'm someone who has realized that truth is beyond language, and this is why the idea of an inconceivable God is being pointed at. Do you know how strange it was for me, for a child to be born in a theocratical society and everybody's like focused on God, and God is the most incredible idea, and you understand how incredible the idea is, but then you're like, wait a minute, is everybody worshiping an inconceivable being? That means is our attention going on something we can't put our attention can't define? Do you understand? It's like the limitation in the presence of the limitless cannot be a limited personality anymore. This is the power of honesty. You get to feel the light, the weights of the soul lift. It's as if imagine everybody has a backpack on, like a heavy backpack, and angry people and evil people have the heaviest backpack, like probably like 20 books in it, you know, like and so the person's like, yo, take off the backpack, and the person's like, no man, this is who I am, this backpack is who I am, don't you understand, I've been carrying it for years, it's me now. And the person's like, no man, whatever you say, it doesn't make sense for you to carry a backpack that heavy. Do you understand? The person's like, no, my ancestors carried this backpack. You know, everybody carried this backpack. I have to carry this backpack, or what does life mean? And the person says, no, look at it again. Your eyes belong to a world freer than your fears. So, what I would say is there's three angles to this sentence, like three ideas here. If we can get an image of them, not an image, but a sense of them, then we get a sense of the whole thing. So what I'm doing is like kind of like I'm using the scientific method, but as a philosopher on ideology. Because ideology may not have like a sort of measurable value, but its image, its symbolism is the measure of it, right? The language exists to convey image. This is why children get bored in class. Do you know why? Do you know why all the children are like, why is this guy talking? I can't hear this anymore. This man has no soul. This teacher has no soul. Somebody give this teacher a soul. Do you know? Do you know why? Because the child cannot see a film behind its eyes. You know, they have been telling the children of the world, read slow. Mr.Within is telling you, read as fast as you can. And when you read, try to see an image. That means if you're smart, you're seeing a very quick film when you read a book. Or a person can surprise themselves, right? Like you could read like the first chapter, then a random chapter, then another chapter, and then you'll always have a reason to go back to that book and read the middle chapters that you never finish. Do you know what I'm saying? If we treat books like wine and keep never read chapters, those books will be incredible in our lives. Do you know? And I've had moments where I've had books on my shelf I've never opened, and I've been called towards opening that book. Do you know what I'm saying? But anyways, I mean, the point is, God is the light of the soul. What is the soul? The soul is being said by mystical context that it's neither an object, neither a subject. If the soul is neither an object, neither a subject, the human being cannot give it a condition. So we have found a strange situation where that which is experiencing life is not a conditional entity, but the moment it looks at life, it's creating a condition. So one can say conscious emergence is a world of condition simultaneously appearing. So when I say God is the light of the soul, do you understand? It's all about the levels we're considering to our being and how the tip of the iceberg, Freud even said this, right? Like Freud, I mean, some of his stuff, I was like, yo man, this guy's got, you know, he's, I don't know. Who knows? But anyways, he had this great contribution where he said there is the conscious mind, which is the tip of the iceberg that's out of water. There's the pre-conscious mind. Imagine the point where it's right underneath and connecting to the surface, right? And then there's like the unconscious, imagine. So what does this mean? This means there are levels to our being. And if there are levels to our being, if there are 8 billion beings, then there are levels to civilization. When I said floors in the subtitle, I've written, floors to civilization, civilization floors. What I meant is we're experiencing a freaking 2D experience of a 3D world. Isn't that weird? Do you understand? Like our mobility and navigation is limited. Like we need to either have like, Spider-Man, like kind of like abilities or something. Do you understand? Or jetpacks or something. Like, do you understand? Or we have to create some sort of giant anti-gravity field, right? And imagine in that anti-gravity field, children can, jump as high as they want, That would be the greatest theme park in existence, I think. It's like, yo, an anti-gravity room? Here, take my money. The soul is inconceivable. You can't say anything about it other than how in, for example, Vedic thought, there was the notion of the Atman, the individual soul, and the Parabrahman, the collective soul. Okay? And the idea was that you think that you're a persona. First of all, you think you're an object. Okay, that's like obvious because you're surviving, right? So first you think you're an object. Then what happens? Then people give you've been given a name, and people say your name. People call you, and sorry guys, I lost my train of thought there. What can I say? I said this is going to be a short episode. Maybe I need to knock this out, give a home run here. God is the light of the soul. How have I, as an individual on this planet, 1 out of 8 billion human beings, reporting to the tribe, to the global tribe, to the greatness of the human species, for the greatness of the human species? That's the only reason I'm actually here. I see no other, you see, the divine is that purpose too. The greatness of humanity is the greatness of human vision. The greatness of human vision is how that vision started. Do you understand? It's as if, like, here's this religious story, the monotheistic theological lens, that God is saying, I have created something so great that I said to all my world and creation to bow down, and then there was one who rebelled. And so the fallen angel, some people think it's an entity, it's an angel, but the fallen angel, from a mystical context, is the notion of God's doubt. The God's first doubt of his own creation. Why? Because an angel is defined as a being that doesn't have free will. So that means it's a puppet show. But what I mean is that God is in some sense giving commands to the angels. So that means the rebellion of the angel is the divine will. Seems to be. So what that means is there has never been anything wrong. Greatness has been in some sense expressing greatness. That's what's going on. That's what we have forgotten. That's what the celebration cultures of the future will find. That's where the honorable advanced humanity will find. There will come a time where every human being you will see that there isn't a person there, there isn't a name there, they're not even a body. They are an advanced potential of an organized effort, of intelligent activity, and an ambassador of consciousness in this universal sector. We are the ones who have awakened early. So when I say God is the light of the soul that in some sense made a mistake, and in some sense its impurity, earth is in some sense this might sound strange, but the view I have on it, on theological view I have on it, is kind of like when Adam and Eve sinned, right, their genitalia was revealed, right? So what that means is they descended into the level of desire, because they in some sense acted without consciousness. So it was as if the first human being acted unconsciously and everybody was cast into an unconscious world. Do you understand? That's kind of like the idea. But the idea is, like in certain religious theological contexts, there is this idea that God created the soul of man, but in some sense God commands an angel to, in some sense, to create the soul of every other human being that has come after Adam and Eve. So anyways, what am I saying here? What I'm saying is that, do we want to be like Oscar-winning performers in a theater of Game of Worlds? Do we want to be false in the presence of a truth that perhaps is unspeakable? Perhaps there's something more than we can see. I mean, like, I can't see how someone in China is like, dancing, for example. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't see it, like what the 8 billion other human beings are doing. It's like, why am I so freaked out about there being other worlds and other dimensions and other civilizations and even other possibilities that we have not even fathomed or can fathom yet? And that's why you're here, dear viewer. Whether it's you who will walk towards the advanced civilization or your descendants, that's why you are hearing these Mr. Within talks. It's kind of like the future has chosen you. Because the past is past and the present has nowhere to go. The future is our only road. They say God is an inconceivable idea, right? So it's an inconceivable causal position. So what else is inconceivable? And in religion, they say everything started from God, everything returns to God. What I'm saying, it's just the idea that I'm seeing right now. That idea of everything returning to God, it's the idea that the destiny of the human species is towards becoming an inconceivable being. We are climbing the staircase of paradise, but not as a shape, as the winds between the branches of knowledge. That's why I coined the term the pilots of consciousness. Really, that's what I see here. Somebody once asked me, do you see stupid people? Like, do I consider stupid people? And I've said, like, I 100% consider stupid actions. Doesn't matter if you're a smart or stupid person doing it. Doesn't matter what level of your IQ score is. If you do something stupid, it's like, that's stupid, right? They're like, this man has a ridiculously high IQ, but he just, he like, I don't know, destroyed a library. It's like, oh my god. It's like, yo, Genghis Khan as a teenager. No, I'm kidding. Anyways, guys, what I'm trying to say here is, first of all, I am humbled. And it was only this year, in 2023, that something happened that I experienced, like the idea of God became meaningful like a strike of lightning, like a flash of genius. You don't understand. Like, I never thought God would, in some sense, be the ultimate resolution through an intellectual route, right? I thought God was like through your heart, through love, through all of this. I never thought like, yo, you can actually it's like common sense leads there. Let me tell you what's going on here. Nobody knows who they are, because if they did, they wouldn't have a reason to continue. The unknown is the purpose of knowledge. This is what the educational system is not saying. And that's the thin ice it stands on. That there will come a moment where the species will awaken and realize our eyes are sacred, because our eyes, our DNA has never existed before. Do you understand? Like, this idea kind of like, I get a bit emotional. You know why? Because every human being that is born on this planet has an option. You have an option to live in accordance to an archetype that already exists. You can try to be like something that already exists. You could either be in the present and think you're nothing all the time, which is an ignorance. Or you can realize that the value of this life is not predetermined. Do you understand? The beautiful heart converts the ugly mind into a realization that if attention is not physical, what can die? Dear humanity, how can something that is not physical, like, do you understand? My body's physical, I'm moving my hand right now, but the awareness to my body, that's not physical, right? Consciousness is not physical. This is why we can't define it. So the greatest way we can define it is through our inner realms and through the notions of trying to probabilize the future. There will come a time where you will feel a royalty to this world. It will be surpass anybody you know. There will come a moment where you will feel you're standing in the presence of the greatest honor of cosmic existence. That is what being in a world is. Do you understand? You're standing on the shoulder of not a gigantic planet, but a gigantic world. You're there. We are attending the only greatest event ever. Somebody in the chat section says we are not our bodies. Well said. But how are you not our bodies? Like, how are you saying that sentence? When you say we're not our bodies, does that mean, like, it's not my responsibility if I'm not the Iron Man suit? Why should I care for the Iron Man suit? If I didn't create the Iron Man suit, imagine you borrow Tony Stark's. Imagine like Tony Stark's cousin, okay, borrows like Tony Stark's Iron Man suit to go to prom. Imagine Iron Man wants to go into a nightclub and they're like, "Sir, we can't let you in." And he's like, "Why?" It's like, it's like, "Why? I'm wearing a suit." It's like, "No, sir, you can't. It's not the appropriate suit, for a luxury nightclub." And imagine Iron Man owns the nightclub. Sorry guys, my attention's drifting. But anyways, I want to say this idea that my laptop has right now 10% battery, so 10% should be enough. My dear species, we find ourselves in an unknown world. We have been raised, and we should honor and in some sense help the illusions and the lies that we lived in. This might sound bizarre, but to help the lie, not the lie of the outer realms. Those you must in some sense be brutally honest, right? But when it comes to the inner realms, you must realize it's kind of like, let me tell you, just like the human being, just like your stomach needs food to digest, your brain needs situations, needs literally like needs to begin considering things, right? The secret to life is concentration. So many people think ritualism is a way to access the divine. No, it's simple concentration. It's an ability to be with your world before being something specific in your world. So when I say God is the light of the soul, you know, by the way, when I was driving, I thought for a moment, sometimes I considered like I have my biological sight, and then I have my inner sight, my mind sight. And through my mind sight, I envisioned that, imagine suddenly this very bright white light, starlight white light, suddenly started emerging between the skyscrapers, and we couldn't understand why, but it was so beautiful. Imagine. Do you understand? This world just needs an inclusion. We just need to add beauty to it. But not a beauty that is finite, an infinite beauty. Not the beauty of sacrifice, but the beauty of street smart efficiency, of win-win victory. You see, as someone who... They say, what is a monk to after enlightenment? Chop wood, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. What is a monk to after enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. After you realize that you are an unknown presence, where you're knowing your idea of self synchronized and overlaid upon your body, once you notice the presence of the unknown and you can be content with it, that's another way of saying you have allowed yourself to notice God. You cannot see God. God sees man. Do you understand? Because the eyes of the Creator are not man's eyes. But our breath may be the Creator's breath, in the sense that they say, like they asked Kabir, this yogic mystic, they're like, Kabir shouted at one of his disciples. He's like, disciple, in front of everybody, and he's like, disciple, tell me, what is God? And the disciple said, God is the breath inside the breath. And he was pointing to the theological story of how truth created the simulation. So why is the simulation fearing itself? This is when there is no such thing as self-love. I mean, like, that's like, it's like, how can you love an idea? You know, how can non-fiction love fiction? That's the question, right? So anybody who has been gone towards anything of a creative domain, if creativity has been like a glow of a unique, like, you know, creative flame in the human species, if you have noticed novelty, then you realize the past can't have the loudest voice, right? But doesn't mean the past was wrong. The idea is, what should 8 billion... Here, think of it this way. There are 3 dimensions. A visible dimension, invisible dimension, 3 levels. And an a visible level, an invisible level, and an inconceivable level. Body, mind, soul, imagine. Traditional spiritual trio. And what does body, mind, soul mean? It means in the visible dimension, the purpose of life is to play the role of your existence and serve the advancement of the greatness of the potential of what we are. That means I realize that I have to start caring for people's potential, because if I don't, then I have been a fool boxing myself in my own opinion. Do you understand? That's one of the most saddest forms of ignorance, your own ignorance. So this laptop might end, and I would hopefully honorably say, what I mean by God is the light of the soul. I consider the body the soldiers of God. I consider the mind the commander of God. I consider the soul of every individual being the general of God. And I consider God to in some sense be the inconceivable authority of being. And believe it or not, it's not like that God is like language, right? It's man's heart. It's literally like we're boxed into something, and it's like, imagine a kitten in a box, and the kitten can't come out of the box alone, and that's like kind of the human situation, where man is forced to consider his own isolation. He realizes he has to interact with the world, or he'll stop being a being. Do you understand? That means our brain is so advanced that it's being actually the world before allowing us to pinpoint a self in that inner subjective world. You know, they asked this yogi, you know, this guy went to this yogi and he's like, yogi, show me, enlightened guy, show me God. Or can you show me God? And the enlightened guy said, yes, I can. And the person's like, yes, you can show me God. And the person's like, yeah, I can show you God. And the person's like, okay, show me God. And the person's like, okay, I want you to notice your ego. For a moment, just notice your idea of yourself. And the person's like, okay, I can notice it. Okay, and the person then says, okay, just for a second, close your eyes and notice the idea of yourself. And the person closes their eyes and still notices the idea of themselves in the moment. Now the person says, who is noticing that idea of self? That means before you, let's say before I say these words, what is true selecting them? I'm telling you guys, in behind our eyes, we are literally like this unknown witness. We are the mystery of the cosmos. It's like, you know, it's hilarious. Who's trying to unravel the question mark of the cosmos? The question mark of the cosmos. The mystery is in some sense looking for mystery and remembering itself. How hilarious is that? God is playing with man in such a beautiful way. Do you understand? The divine is like the greatest ally of mankind. Do you understand? It's the greatest ally of all beings. Because what the divine implies, it is the original world. That's what it implies. The inconceivable is the original world. God's being is the being where all being is arising from. If God is inconceivable, it's another way of saying inconceivably you are invisibly moving your visibility, moving in the visible. The mysteries of the world is fascinating, and God is the light of the soul, because when the soul like, think of it this way, that the soldiers messed up, like, right, and the commanding officer came in, and the commanding officer messed up, and then the general went in. And then before the general went in, imagine the soul, the God, the emperor was in some sense the divine truth, authority of the divine throne, the majesty of being. Do you understand how powerful the idea of God is? It's a way of making the world a familiar place, in the sense that we're not alone. Something else was here. Do you understand? Like, people may think like the idea of God, let me tell you the psychological possibilities it provides. Okay, it's another way of saying, for me specifically, this was my kind of like wake up, okay? But it's not a wake up to artificial robotic behavioralism, right? It's just a realization. And what I realized is that why should there be anything moving at all here? And that's kind of like a glimpse. I don't want to say I see God, but I see what God has done, therefore I see God's intent. The soul is the individual faith. You have faith in yourself. But then the person's like, okay, where did my self come from? And then you have faith in your collective. You know, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like the person's like, where did my self come from? It came from the world. Oh, okay. And then where did the world come from? Right? And then this is where materialism is saying the world came from yourself. But this is where religion is saying the world came from an inconceivable creator. So the idea of the inconceivable creator has authorized unknown possibility in that worldview. Do you understand? That means, think of it this way: if you believe in the materialistic perception, if you feel you're an elemental hallucination that has no value, kind of like a hollow personality, hollow, like a hollow projector, or as if your psychological experience is just like your brain is projecting something while it's here. But it's way more complicated than that, right? This is where the idea of like being embodied comes in. Same way the Tony Stark became Iron Man. Imagine if Tony Stark forgot he was Iron Man, right? That would be as if like God would be that which pulls Tony Stark out of the Iron Man suit. For example, Thor's hammer out of nowhere suddenly. Imagine Tony Stark's wife and kids. They're like, Tony, get out of the fucking suit. You've been in there for days, for months. The children can't hug a robot. It's weird. Get out of there. Imagine Tony Stark's wife is like crying in all of this. And then she calls Thor, Or imagine she calls Hulk, and Hulk and Thor are chilling, okay? And then Hulk's like, oh my God, I gotta go wake up, enlighten Iron Man. And then Thor's like, I got this. And he just throws his hammer and like finishes, like, I don't know, drinking his beer or something. Anyways, guys, this is gonna end 3%. I don't know if I don't think I can really, you know what it is? Whose life is it? If I consider if it's myself's life, then the world becomes mysterious. Then everything outside of that self becomes mysterious. If I consider right now I'm being the life of the species, right, then in some sense I don't have a fear of an individual because I'm experiencing it as a collective being. They say have faith in God, which is another way of saying have faith in the inconceivable, because the inconceivable is another way of saying like how we see the unknown. Like, I don't know if question marks are divine, but they could be. Like 100% there could be this idea of divine question marks, Not only did God create man, God created the ability of man to wonder about what it is. Right? For me, I was like, yo, aren't religions saying that everybody's God's creation? So how can people destroy God's creation? Do you understand? Imagine a bunch of flowers. Imagine like there's different flowers in a garden and all the dandelions are like, no, everybody has to be a dandelion. And all the roses are like, no, everybody has to be a rose. And all the tulips are like, everybody has to be a tulip. Right? And then imagine the butterflies are like, yo, these guys are freaking out. Just be yourselves. Just be present in the world. Because the world is God's will. Do you understand? I remember as a kid in Iran, imagine if somebody does a backflip, right, in an Islamic country, the people will be like, mashallah, which is another way of saying like, look at what God's will is doing today. Do you know? Look at how fascinating God's will is. Right? Look at how fascinating the administration of such a complex system that is leading to such a simple appreciation of it. It's like to be conscious as in the human framework is an incredible luxury. But now what you do with this opportunity, it's another way of saying, if you are the pilot, if you are piloting your attention in an unknown world, and if there are infinite viewpoints, which viewpoint do you choose? So the idea came to me that, okay, if there's infinite viewpoints, I didn't create the infinity must have a creator, let's say, from a perspective, have a creator. If I didn't create this world, then I can't be in charge of it, right? Not that I can't be in charge of it, but I can't administer it. Right? So when it's kind of like a person having the ego of an administrator, but then realizing human beings are in a moderator role. We're moderating life in the moment. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. I hope this episode was worthy. And at the same time, there's so much more. This idea is so much more deeper. But maybe in the future I may do a part 2.